Hello and welcome to a bonus episode of the Talent Intelligence podcast, where we catch up with the latest in the world of recruitment. Today we have Al Frater, who is the new Head of Talent Solutions at Solutions Driven. Welcome, Al. How are you today?
Oh, thanks for that. I'm very well, thank you. Yes, how are you doing?
I am doing well. I always seem to record these on a Friday, which is a nice way to ease yourself into the weekend with a nice chat.
Lovely. I look forward to it.
Al, you've been with Solutions Driven a couple of months now, so I thought I'd give you a little bit of time to bed in and feel comfortable before I pulled you on the podcast to quiz
Very
you.
kind. Very kind. Very kind. Yeah, I joined in mid-November. So yeah, I've joined as head of talent solutions. So I guess we'll dig into that in a bit more. But yeah, that's me.
Absolutely. So probably the best place to start today is for you to introduce yourself, give us a bit of background about your career so far, how you ended up in growth, how you ended up in recruitment, all that fun stuff.
Well, I've had I guess, a meandering career is probably the way to describe it. So I started off the natural thing, having studied zoology at university, the natural thing is to go into advertising, obviously.
Yep.
I actually initially started off wanting to do forensic science, but that went awry. But that's a long story. So if anyone wants to hear the story, ask me when you see me in person.
Okay.
But having done zoology, I didn't really know what I wanted to do with it. So like a lot of graduates, I guess, I ended up looking for a job just to pay the bills, and ended up in direct marketing, so in the advertising world. And I fell into a account management role. I'd always been quite good with people and selling, and it just morphed into a career that 10 years later I was account director for quite a few big brands and looking after their direct marketing efforts in terms of fundraising for charities and credit cards, trying to sign people up and all that sort of stuff, and just didn't really love it. So I changed tack slightly. I went back to university and studied psychology, which is a real passion of mine. And off the back of my psychology studies, I was looking to go down the route of being a fully trained occupational psychologist. Did a master's in occupational psychology, which I loved. And actually, there's a big crossover between sales and psychology, and so I ended up going into the psychology for business, industrial psychology world as a sales leader, and using both my experience in the commercial world and also the love and the training I had in business psychology to sort of have my second career in the recruitment talent acquisition world. So started off in the psychometrics and the consulting world around psychometric testing and screening employees as people hire them. And then I transitioned that into a slightly more, I guess the company I first joined was a traditional psychometrics business. That then became a more sort of cutting edge game-based technology that I joined about 6 or 7 years ago, and spent, I guess that was really a morphing into HR tech. And then the final stage was I had an opportunity to join an RPO business, and loved it. Loved the idea of disrupting. All the industries I've been in have been quite disruptive, and so project RPO and mini RPO, which is what I'm joined Solutions Driven to do, was really attractive to me from a kind of a growth perspective, both from the market's going to be growing, but also for me personally, love being around people, love HR and technology, so it all kind of mixes together quite nicely.
I was
very meandering.
I was going to say that your story is a typical one, and I don't mean that in like, yeah, everyone has done the same things that you have. I just mean nobody ever means to end up in recruitment, do they? I saw today that somebody has one of the universities have started doing a recruitment course, which I think is probably one of the first ones of its kind, because and it's funny because everyone who works in recruitment didn't mean to get there, but if you love recruitment, like you love recruitment, people are so passionate about it. Yeah,
that's it. So many people say that, and I'm exactly the same. Didn't mean to, perhaps didn't even want to get into recruitment. That wouldn't have been my first on my list at all. But yeah, love it. I think it's a great career for people to have, and brilliant. I hadn't seen that story about the degree, but why not? I mean, absolutely.
Yeah, I will send you the link once we have finished here today. So
all right, I'll sign up.
So you've been in the space for a while, doing various things, the recruitment space. What's the kind of biggest changes that have happened over the last, say, 5, 10 years?
That was very delicately put.
Mhm.
So I was thinking about this. No, I knew you'd ask that question. So I think, what have I seen in the last few years? So technology has always been in the recruitment world, like,
Yeah.
or certainly in my career over the last decade or so. Technology has formed an increasingly big part of it. But I think, like a lot of technology advances that you see in other industries, and has happened over the last 100 years or so, it's starting to accelerate. And actually, we're seeing more and more interesting technology coming along and forming a part or parts or the majority of recruitment processes. So I think that's a really interesting change, and definitely see it speeding up. It's not always for the best. It's not always good. A lot of the time it is, but there are also some red doors there that, like, I don't know, we should perhaps be mindful of.
Yeah.
I think the other big change I've seen over the last 3 or 4 years maybe has been a level of accountability that has come to the TA world more so than we've perhaps seen before. I mean, I've been part of industry groups with TA leaders for a long time, and there was a frustration certainly a few years back of not being listened to, not having a voice at the top table within companies, perhaps not having the ear of the C-suite. I think that is steadily growing and improving, and the level of accountability has grown with that as well. That comes with different pressures and sort of a different lens that is now put on TA. And obviously, there's been a crazy couple of years with the pandemic and the global economy and all the sort of stuff that's happening, and there's been a lot of change to organisations and businesses, and TA has taken the brunt of that at times, and then has been kind of looked upon to save things and kickstart businesses again. So there's definitely been an increased level of accountability. I think that the other thing that I've been delighted to see over my career in HR and working with recruiters and HR teams has been, I guess, the awakening to just the diversity challenges that we know are still happening in various roles and industries and professions. I think the fact that everyone is now acutely aware of it is great. We now know we need to do things to try and combat it as much as we can in as many ways we can as well. So we're starting to see that really becoming an expectation now that D&I and E is right at the forefront of everyone's minds, which is great. We've still got an awful lot of to do, but yeah, it really, I've definitely seen that being, it was a sort of a nice to have, I should almost kind of mention it, to it really has to happen now, which has been a lovely evolution.
Yeah, our chief diversity officer, Salma, I don't know if you've seen it yet, but she did a webinar just before Christmas on kind of how to avoid the diversity downturn, because I think everyone is realizing that it is vital, but it's one of those things that when budgets are tight, that it's one of the first things that tends to slip. So
absolutely, and I get it, right? I understand that sometimes companies, they are worried about certain other things, keeping the lights on, bills coming in, customers happening, and there are things that perhaps then corners get cut because of a limit of resources or time, and it's one of those things that perhaps does get neglected, and that's not right, but I can see how it happens. So yeah, you're right. There was a great podcast by Salman. There are some other fantastic materials out there that I would encourage people to go and seek out to make sure that you are still considering those really important things, because the downturn won't last forever. And then we need to make sure that we're in a good, healthy place moving forward.
Exactly. I'll pop the link to that in the show notes so that anyone who's listening to this can check it out afterwards.
Brilliant.
So now you've joined Solutions Driven after that career, and after the career that you have had, your job is head of talent solutions. Can you tell me and the audience what talent solutions actually means and what your job entails?
Absolutely. Let's start with the second half first. My job is to grow the talent solutions part of the business. So that is both going out and talking to new clients and looking for ways that we can help clients, but also to develop our product roadmap internally in terms of what we're doing. But that's a broad church, because the answer to the first half of your question is it's all things talent. So it could be, I mean, a lot of what we do is embedded talent and placing our amazing recruiters within companies' TA functions and helping them with capacity. And that's a big part of what we do in talent solutions. But we also do a whole raft of consulting services as well, whether that's looking at your process, whether it's giving you advice on D&I that we just talked about a second ago. It could be general consultancy. It could be pay and benefits reviews. It could be tech implementation. You name it, we've probably done it over the course of the last 20, 22 years at Solutions Driven. And we've probably done it in the country you're in, given that we've got this global remit, which is amazing. So that's a really sort of political answer that it's everything, but it's really, our main focus is embedded talent, but also then how can we come in and improve the processes that companies may have, and make sure that we're doing everything we can to maximize the efficiency and getting the business in a better place with their hiring. Now that could be branding, candidate value proposition, all the way through to working on things like psychometrics, my pet favorite, your ATS, your integrations, your video hiring, whatever it might be. And then also reporting suites for organizations as well, and making sure the metrics are right. So I hope that answers the question.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, just adding a lot more value than just putting one person in one role.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. It's all about just turbocharging and supercharging your recruitment and TA efforts. And we've got some amazing recruiters with some fantastic experience. And we have a really wide view of the market and the technology that's out there as well. So companies can come to us and get a view on, what's right for them, and we'll give them a recommendation what that might look at. Now, it might be that we look at it and say, you don't need them, you're perfect, happy days. But there's always little tweaks and changes that we can do as well. So we use a process called recruitment process intelligence, and that really is fundamentally about us. That really is about us coming and looking at what we've got and what we find, and giving you advice, and as well as that, giving you then the recruitment muscle, the horsepower to then deliver that new process.
I was about to do like a little muscle thing there, and then realised that would be pretty embarrassing, and I shouldn't do that. I'm going to stop myself.
All right, don't do that.
Why? Right. So quite a lot of recruitment agencies, recruiters, what they do is basically place people in roles. Once that role is filled, they then step away. What you're talking about in talent solutions is much more of a broad remit, right?
Yeah, for people that aren't familiar with it's an emerged, rather than emerging, it's an emerged sector. People might want to call it embedded talent. People might think of it as recruitment as a service. It's an RPO by another name. So RPOs tend to be very big, very unwieldy, very typically expensive and long-term contracts as well. What we're talking about here is, I guess, the best of the RPO world. So you get you get people that are embedded in your team. They become an extension of your team. They look and feel exactly like a member of your organization, and they live and breathe the values that you have. But then you have the ability to get those roles processed nice and quickly. It's not that you have to do that for 12, 24, 36 months. We can get up and running quite quickly. So you have the kind of agency feel in terms of speed, but you have the full RPO type nature of the business as well. So that's a really simplistic way of putting it, but I guess that's probably where we sit. I'm not saying that there isn't a space for RPO. Of course there is. I'm not saying there isn't space for agencies. Again, there is, and that's a big part of what we do at Solutions Driven. But absolutely, that we're another option for people where if the circumstances are right and they have that need for a hyper agile solution to come in and give their TA function a real boost in terms of output, then we're there to do that, as well as all of those other things I mentioned a minute ago.
You're going to be wearing a lot of hats in the next coming months.
Well, absolutely. But I think what I'm really excited about is that this option is incredibly cost effective for organizations. And
of course,
we're not going to be right for everyone. Of course we're not. But what we can do is give clients that control over a team, a dedicated team on a short-term basis that, like I say, is typically cost effective, but it gives them the ability to have always on recruiting.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is that you can have that flex. So it could be that you take a couple of people from us to help with your, what your process looks like, and then the ongoing running of that process. It could be that you scale that up, and then as you're hiring, you have seasonal peaks and troughs. As that then starts, declining, or we start filling all of those roles, which we will very quickly. You can then scale the team back and up and down as you need to, accordingly. Or when you overlay it with our search practice, you can then have an always-on solution that you can have that ultra flex of up and down with resources, whether they're embedded with you or not. So I think it's a really exciting way for people to look at using a third-party recruitment agency like ours to help with their challenges.
Of course, they can.
Yes, I will have lots of that.
They can control their recruiting, but they can also keep really good control over their budget as well.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So I mean, we work on a fixed cost basis. So there is a monthly management fee for the work that we're doing, and that's it. And we will hire as many as we can for that fee. So there isn't that kind of, oh gosh, we've hired loads and loads of people and it's going to cost us X amount. I mean, although that isn't really a problem, but we can we do it for a fixed fee, so we get the benefit of that assurance of budget.
Sure. You have kind of answered my next question here, because since you started working here, you have spoke about always on recruitment, and that was what I was going to ask you next. But true to form, you have spoken about always on recruitment already.
I mean, I get the reason I talk about that is that when I speak to clients and TA leaders, one of the things is demand planning is a constant battle. It's a constant iteration. People are never sure. If I say to you today, Claire, how many are you going to hire this year? You probably go, well, I think it's this. But the amount of time that clients say, well, I've got 40 live recs at the moment, but I'm probably going to get another 50 added, but then that might be another 70. And it's really hard for you to then go and build a team internally on, full-time contracts. So what we allow is that you can have that flex where you can dial up and down the recruiters that you have from us and the services that we are providing to you based on that need. Now, if things change and that drops right off and you've only got 1 or 2 roles left, well, we have this ability with Solutions Driven to switch our work into the search practice. So you can still work with us, that always on is still happening. And then as and when demand picks up again, we can be really quick to react and give you that capability back internally. So that's what I mean by always on. And I think it's a way of helping TA leaders to fight that uncertainty with what their business is going to throw at them, which I'm imagining will resonate with most of the TA leaders listening to us.
Especially after how much everything has peaked and troughed and changed over the last kind of couple of years. We had Kate Terrell, who worked with us when she was at Actana. She's now with Menlo Security doing cybersecurity. But one of the things she said, and it sounds a bit cheesy, and we laughed about it on the podcast, was just like the only thing that we are certain of coming up in the next year is change. Do you know, it's one of those years where nobody knows what's going to happen. So it feels quite timely that you have joined Solutions Driven just now to take on this role.
Good. Timing's everything.
We're delighted to have you.
Bless you.
Right. So I'm talking about the year ahead, and obviously you don't have a crystal ball, but imagine that you did. What would you say are going to be the big kind of trends in recruitment happening in 2023?
So I think, what do I see happening in the year ahead? Well, it's interesting that the gig economy, right, has been here for a long time now. It's not a new thing. But what I think we're going to see over the next 12, 18 months or so is just the level of that really increasing. I mean, I've seen a few reports recently saying by 2025, nearly half of the workforce are going to be made up of the gig economy. I mean, I find that hard to believe. I'm not sure it's going to be as much as that. but it's definitely heading in that direction. So what does that mean for you as a recruitment function? How are you going to go accommodate that in your plans, and who you're attracting, and how does that work with the other 50% that are not involved? So I think there's a whole lot of organizations that are going to have to embrace this. I think a lot of the organizations that have worked with contractors have done so incredibly well, incredibly efficiently. They've kind of jumped onto that bandwagon and expanded their use of contractors a lot. I think we'll see a lot more organizations go down that route in the next 12 months. I think the other really interesting, and I don't have a crystal ball, so I can't answer this fully, but the other interesting change for me is around AI. So I've been like I said at the start, I've been in HR tech for 8-10 years or so. And there's been a lot of talk about AI throughout that period, and it's always been, it's like that old adage about teenage sex. Everyone talks about it, but no one's actually doing it, right?
Yeah.
The thing with AI, I'm sure that was the case, and there's definitely a sense now that AI is really starting to bear fruit. So I'm sure a lot of our listeners will have heard of Chat GPT and the AI tool they have. Really interesting, and I think the uses of that are going to be fascinating. And that's just the one getting headlines at the moment. There are going to be others now that I think will be doing more. It'll be really interesting to see what interesting takes that happens. And I think those technologies that have claimed to have it in the past, but probably just had a bit of clever machine learning, how will that proper AI really start coming to life and helping us with things like candidate management, pipelining. I think it's going to be really interesting probably a few months, but certainly over the next couple of years. I think AI is going to be a big staple of that. And then how does that change the way we interact as humans with our computers, our devices, when we're looking for jobs and looking for career change and looking for development? And then linking back to what I said about diversity, that then needs to be factored in. That is the AI doing as well as a job as it could do for everyone it's been.
Yeah, because that's always one of the criticisms of being quite tech heavy in the past, was that in terms of diversity, quite a lot of tech and things like psychometric tests as well would be biased against people who maybe English wasn't their first language. And I think there's going to be a lot of interesting ethical and moral stuff that comes out of this as well in recruitment.
And it also, depending on things like, what about just from like a socio-economic point of view, has everyone got the technology that they need to access these tools? I mean, that's one thing. Do you have the bandwidth? There are some societal changes that we need to make in terms of education, definitely, but also, things like access to a quiet, secure place with an internet connection to be able to do some of the stuff that maybe organizations are asking them to do as they're applying for jobs. So there are some interesting ethical dilemmas which I think will be quite interesting. It's not just the things like self-driving cars that we need to think about. Slightly more mundane stuff about applying for jobs. How does that get impacted by some of these things? So I think it's going to be I look forward to seeing the debate pan out over the next year or so.
I think it's going to be an interesting year, 2023, for a variety of reasons.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, well, we're almost ready to wrap up, but I always like to finish off these podcasts with some tips or some actionable insights that people can take away, so they haven't just listened to us rabbiting on for 20 minutes, half an hour. But what, in your opinion, obviously we're talking about the fact that there's peaks and troughs, we're going through a bit of a recession, a bit of a downturn at the moment. What are the 3 things that businesses can do to ensure that their recruitment function comes out the other end of this dip stronger or as strong as what they went in?
Okay. So I've got a bit of pet hate, which I'll put as my number 1, right? And I'm probably preaching to the choir here, but first things first is you've got to know what you're after. Okay, so what is it you're actually wanting from the role that you're hiring for? All roles, but I still see companies going out to market with a spec that is just not right, or slightly old-fashioned, or they've cut and pasted it from 5 years ago. Have you actually spent time looking at what your organisation needs for that role? Now, the reason this is becoming more and more important is, going back to what I said earlier about remote working, gig economy, all that sort of stuff. do you really need some of those skills that you have on there? Some of those must-haves that you are certain are really important?
Yeah.
Because half the time I look at them and I'm like, why are you needing that? And
Yeah.
then if you are certain that you need some of those things, what's that going to do to your available pool? So that's a really important part of it. Then also getting the spec right is how, and this goes back to my psychology days, but unless you have the spec in terms of what you're after, both skills, hard and soft skills, but also personality and behaviors,
Hmm.
what is it you're looking for? Unless you define that first and work with your stakeholders internally, you're setting yourself up for a bit of a failure, because you'll probably end up with the wrong person, a disgruntled process, etc., etc. So that would be my top tip. If you're not doing that, please do it.
Please.
Please do it. Second would be, I'm a huge believer in getting your values right as a business when you're looking to attract. So candidate value proposition or employee value proposition, people might know it as, is incredibly important. You've got to be open and honest and transparent about who you are and what you're looking to do, what you offer. That attraction process has got to feel genuine
Mhm.
and heartfelt. And really, if you do that, you're going to get better candidates coming through. You're going to have better hiring success. If all of the people that touch your candidates as part of the process, extol the values of your business, you're going to have a better hiring experience, both internally and externally, actually. And then you'll get better people aligned to your values and not then deciding to jump ship after a few months. Hopefully that's that, but it should reduce that churn as well. So values are incredibly important, and I think certainly as the world of social media and carries on at pace and has changed, and some of the older people like me are leaving the marketplace, not quite, but the older generation leaving, things like Glassdoor and people talking online about their experiences and their values and what they're seeing, it's just more and more important than
Yeah.
absolutely. So I think a lot of companies have done great work in this. I just think we just need to carry on doing better. So have that at the forefront of your mind. And then the final bit we've already touched on. My third one would be avoiding that diversity downturn. So I'm pleased you're going to post the link to Salma's talk for people to go and have a look at. But you know that times may be tough now, but if you're starting to build up a problem for yourself by cutting corners on certain things, and diversity and inclusion is going to be a really important one, I think, here to not do this with, because you're just going to build up problems further down the line. And we, this hopefully won't be that long of a downturn, but actually, when we come out of it, you don't want to be in a position where, going back to my previous point, your values look different to the experience that people see when they look at your organisation and say, well, where is your diversity and what is your policy on this and how have you treated people from minority groups in the past? So avoid that now. Make good. What's they were saying about you fix the roof in the summer because when winter comes you're in a good place and whatever. Butchered that, but that is the kind of mindset you have to have here. Actually, when times are tough, you need to really focus on these things as well. So that would be my top 3 tips, and my fourth one would be don't use analogies on the hoof that you don't know.
I was gonna try and help you out with make hay while the sun
That's
shines.
it.
And I was
Yeah,
like,
it's that sort of
I
thing.
don't think that necessarily fits
No, not sure about
the analogy there. This, do you know what, we do recruiting, we don't do analogies.
No,
So
exactly.
fine. Yeah.
If that hasn't made any sense at all, feel free to message me and ask me to clarify. But yeah, I hopefully that comes across. So I guess that would be my top tips for people.
Do you know, all 3 of those fit into the topic of alignment, right? So you're aligning all your stakeholders, making sure that you're aligning your candidate brand and your engagement with the people who you want to attract. And then the diversity part fits into that as well. It's all part of your employer brand and aligning, making sure you're aligning yourself with the people who you want to hire long term and your goals for the future. So yeah.
Yeah, exactly that. That would be a very succinct way of putting it. That's why you're in marketing, Kat.
You'd think I'd be better at analogies, wouldn't you?
I'll work on that.
Well, Al, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on today. Thank you so much for spending part of your Friday afternoon with us. and I'm sure that we will chat soon in the future. We'll have to get you back on when
Oh, love
to
to.
see if we can see if your crystal ball predictions have come true.
Yeah. Brilliant stuff. All right. Well, thank you for your time, and thank you to listening, everyone listening. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Al.
Bye.
Bye.